There's a country where it never rains into a river. It never rains into a lake. There isn't one, not a single natural lake or river anywhere on the island. Every drop of drinking water on this island comes from the sky, off a roof, into a tank, buried under someone's house. 21 square miles, 64,000 people. And every single one of them is drinking rainwater their own roof caught. Because the law leaves them no other choice. If the rain stops, so does the water. This is Bermuda. And what looks like paradise from a cruise ship window is actually one of the most engineered survival systems on Earth. A place where the government had to legislate how people catch water out of the sky just to keep them alive. Start with the roofs. Every house on this island is required by law to have a stepped white limestone roof. Not for style, for survival. Those steps aren't decoration. They're a filtration system, slowing rainwater down so it can be funneled, cleaned, and stored underground before anyone drinks it. Skip that roof design, and you don't just lose curb appeal. You lose your only water source. On an island this small, the sky isn't scenery. It's the water company, and it doesn't take requests. Now the land itself. 21 square miles sounds small until you try to live on it. That's smaller than most American airports. And onto that sliver of coral rock, the island has packed 64,000 residents, one of the highest population densities on the planet. There's no room to sprawl, no room to expand. Every inch of buildable land was already claimed decades ago. So when a Bermudian tells you they want to buy a house, understand what they're actually asking for. The average home here doesn't sell for what a house costs in Miami or London. It sells for over $1 million for modest homes, not mansions. Rent for a basic 2-bedroom apartment can run $6,000 a month on an island with no room left to build. That's not a housing market. That's a lottery, with a black majority population competing against a wave of ultra-wealthy foreign executives who don't even have to win because they're not spending Bermudian salaries. They're spending reinsurance money. Here's the twist most people never hear about. Bermuda isn't just a tourist postcard. It's one of the largest reinsurance and offshore finance capitals on Earth, a jurisdiction that, at various points, has been home to more insurance capital passing through it than entire mid-sized countries generate in GDP. Global risk, hurricanes, earthquakes, pandemics, gets priced, insured, and reinsured through firms headquartered on this 21 square mile rock. That industry is why Bermuda has no income tax. It's also why the cost of everything else exploded. Executives making 7 figures fly in from New York and London, and they don't need Bermuda to be affordable. They need it to be exclusive. So the market bent to them. And the people who were born here, whose families have lived on this island for generations, got pushed toward the edges of their own home. The wealth never left. It just stopped belonging to the people who built the island. Follow the money further, and the trap gets tighter. With no income tax, the government still needs revenue, so it comes from somewhere else. Import duties. Bermuda imports almost everything. Food, fuel, building materials, cars, even most construction lumber, because the island produces almost none of it itself. Every one of those imports gets taxed at the border, sometimes over 20%, before it ever reaches a shelf. That means a carton of milk, a box of cereal, a gallon of gas, all of it carries an invisible markup baked in before a Bermudian resident even touches it. Groceries here can run 2 to 3 times what the same items cost on the U.S. mainland. A place with no income tax quietly makes its money on the exact thing every resident cannot avoid: eating. So people adapt. Households here don't grocery shop the way Americans do. They plan around shipping schedules, because if the cargo boat is delayed, entire stores run thin on specific goods until the next one docks. Residents talk about boat day the way other places talk about payday. The whole island's pantry runs on a maritime supply chain with no backup route, no bridge to a neighboring country, no truck that can just reroute around a problem. Cut off the boat, and you don't just delay a delivery. You threaten what's on every table on the island. Now add the threat sitting offshore every single year. Bermuda sits directly inside the Atlantic hurricane belt, a small target in open ocean with nothing to slow a storm down before it arrives. Unlike coastal cities on a mainland, there's no retreat inland. There is no inland. You're either on the island when the storm hits, or you're not on the island at all. And this is where the story loops back to the beginning, because those stepped white roofs aren't just water catchers. They're built low, reinforced, and rounded at the edges specifically to survive hurricane-force wind without losing their grip. The same design forced on every homeowner by law to solve the water crisis is also the design keeping their roof attached to their house during a Category 3. Every roof on this island is doing 2 jobs at once: catch the water or lose the house. There's no version where it only has to do one. Now look at how people actually move through daily life here, because even that has been engineered by scarcity. For decades, Bermuda enforced a strict 1 car per household law. Even today, rental cars for tourists are largely banned outright. Visitors get scooters, not cars. The roads are narrow, colonial-era paths never built for modern traffic. And the speed limit across the entire island tops out at roughly 35 kilometers per hour. Not because of caution, because there's physically nowhere to go fast. That forces almost the entire population onto buses, ferries, and scooters, a transit system built not out of environmental ideology, but out of brute geographic necessity. The money moves at the speed of Wall Street. The people move at the speed of a scooter, capped at 22 miles an hour. Nobody asked if that was sustainable. That gap between the offshore money and the people underneath it has a history, and it's not a clean one. Bermuda's population is majority black, descended largely from enslaved people brought to the island under British colonial rule. Wealth and land ownership on the island have historically concentrated with a smaller white population, and while the legal barriers of segregation were dismantled decades ago, the economic architecture built on top of that history never fully reset. Today, when a Bermudian talks about being priced out of their own neighborhood, they're often describing the newest layer of a very old problem, just wearing a different uniform. The uniform of an offshore executive instead of a colonial landowner. That's why this story barely exists in English language media outside a narrow financial press. Reinsurance journalists cover Bermuda's tax code. Travel channels cover its pink beaches. Almost nobody connects the two. Nobody asks what it actually costs the people living underneath that tax code to keep the beaches that pretty. The postcard was never lying. It just never showed you who was priced out of the picture it was selling. So put the whole system together. An island with no rivers, forcing every resident to legally engineer their own water supply out of the sky. A housing market inflated by foreign finance money until the people born there can barely afford to stay. A tax structure that skips income but taxes survival, food, fuel, the boat that brings both. A hurricane season with no inland escape route, solved only by the same forced architecture that solves the water crisis. And underneath all of it, a population still living inside the economic shape colonialism carved centuries ago, now reinforced by a different kind of outside money. None of these problems are separate. They're the same problem, wearing 5 different disguises, scarcity, engineered into every level of life on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic, with nowhere to expand and nowhere to run. And that stepped white roof over every single house on the island? It was never just architecture. It's the whole story, sitting right there in plain sight, the same design holding back the storm that could destroy the island and catching the only water that keeps it alive. 1 roof, 2 threats, 0 room for error. That's not a postcard. That's survival, built into the blueprint, and every family on the island is still living underneath it.